My family did not come to my wedding. Not my mother, not my father, not even my sister. They all had important work that day. I stood there in my white dress, looking at empty chairs, trying to smile like it didn't hurt, but inside I was breaking. I thought that was the end, that I didn't matter to them anymore. But something strange happened just a few days later. The same people who ignored my biggest day suddenly showed up at my door, smiling, acting nice, calling me our dear daughter again. Why? What changed in just a few days? What did they find out about my husband that made them run back to me like nothing ever happened? And the biggest question is, did I forgive them? Or did I do something they never expected? Trust me, what happened next will shock you. So before we go ahead, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I really want to see how far this story reaches. My name is Emma Collins. I still remember that morning very clearly, like it was yesterday. It was my wedding day, the day every girl dreams about since childhood. White dress, flowers, music, family, happiness. But my day was not like that. Not at all. I was standing in front of the mirror. My hands were shaking a little. Not because of makeup, not because of dress, but because of one thing. My family was not there. I looked at my phone again. No calls. No messages. No, we are coming. Nothing. Just silence. I tried to smile. I told myself, maybe they are late. Maybe traffic. Maybe surprise. Maybe. But deep inside, I already knew the truth. They were not coming. I slowly sat down on the chair. My wedding dress spread around me on the floor. It was beautiful. Simple, but beautiful. I paid for it myself. Like everything else in my life. No father to walk me down the aisle. No mother fixing my hair. No sister helping me with dress. Just me. And that feeling. It was very heavy. Like something pressing on my chest. This was not first time. No. My whole life was like this. I was always the second option. Always the strong one. Always the one who does not need much. My younger sister, Lily. She was everything for them. Pretty soft, emotional. And me? I was just responsible Emma. When I was 10, I remember my birthday. Small cake. Only 2 friends. No decorations. Mom said, Emma, you understand, we are busy. But next year, Lily got big party. Balloons. Music. Many people. Expensive gifts. I asked my mom, why not me? She smiled and said, you are strong, Emma. You don't need all this. That line, I heard it again and again in my life. You are strong. You understand. You don't need much. But truth is, I needed love too. When I was in school, I studied hard, very hard, late nights, no help, no support. And when I graduated, top of my class, I looked at the crowd, searching for my parents, but they were not there. Why? Because Lily had a dance show that day. Mom said, we will watch your video later. They never did. In college, same story. I worked part-time job, paid my own fees, lived simple life, while Lily was traveling, shopping, enjoying life. Dad used to say, she is finding herself. And me? I already found myself. So I did not deserve help. That's how they think. Years passed. I built my career. Slowly, step by step. No shortcuts. No help. I became a project manager in a construction company. Good job. Good salary. Small apartment. Peaceful life. That's when I met Daniel. He was simple. Calm. Kind. Not like rich people who show off. He listened. He respected me. For the first time, someone saw me, not as strong girl, but as a human. We met at work project. He was part of investment team. Quiet man, but very smart. We started talking, then coffee, then long walks, then love, real love. After 1 year, he proposed. Simple way. No big show. Just honest words. I said yes. Without fear. Without doubt. But there was one thing I was scared of: my family. I told Daniel everything. Every story, every pain, every memory. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Emma, you don't need to prove anything to anyone." That line stayed in my heart. Still, I wanted to try one more time. I called my mom. "Mom, I am getting married." Silence. Then she said, "Oh, okay." No excitement, no happiness, just okay. I told her date. I invited her. I invited everyone. She said, "We will see." That we will see. I already understood. Days passed. No confirmation. No calls. No questions about wedding. But I kept hoping. Maybe this time they will come. Maybe this time they will choose me. Wedding day came. And now I was sitting alone in that room, looking at my phone, waiting. But no one came. My best friend Sarah was there. She held my hand. She said, "I am here. You are not alone." I smiled, but tears came, because I knew she is right. But still, something was missing. Family. Time was running. Guests were waiting. Music started. I stood up, took deep breath, looked in mirror, and I said to myself, "Emma, you are enough." Then I walked out, alone. Every step felt heavy, but I kept walking. At the end of aisle, Daniel was standing, looking at me, like I am the only person in this world. And in that moment, I felt something change. Maybe I did not lose everything. Maybe I was starting something new. But I did not know one thing. After the wedding, everything became very quiet, but also very peaceful. I woke up the next morning in Daniel's apartment, now our home, and for the first time in many years, I did not feel stress in my chest. No pressure, no expectations, no one telling me what I should do or how I should feel. Daniel made coffee for me and smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. And that simple moment felt more valuable than anything my family ever gave me. I told him softly they didn't come, and he looked at me with calm eyes and said, "I know, but I came and I will always come." That sentence stayed inside me like warmth. Days started to pass in a simple way. We cooked together, watched movies, and talked about our future. Daniel never talked about money, never showed anything expensive, and honestly I thought he was just a normal guy with a stable job. His clothes were simple, his car was normal, and his lifestyle was very quiet. That is why I loved him more, because he was real. I also decided not to call my family again. I felt tired of trying. If they did not care about my wedding, then maybe they never really cared about me. I wanted to move on. 1 week later, something unexpected happened at Daniel's office. He asked me to come with him to a small company event. I was a little nervous because I don't like big groups, but he said, "Just trust me." So I went with him. When we reached there, I noticed something strange. People were looking at Daniel with respect, not normal respect, something bigger. Some people were even nervous around him. I thought maybe he is more important in the company than I know. Then one man came to him and said, "Sir, the investors are waiting for you." I froze for a second. "Sir? Investors?" I looked at Daniel, confused, but he just smiled and said, "I'll be back in a minute." I stood there thinking, what is going on? A woman came to me and said, "You must be Daniel's wife. We heard about the wedding." I smiled politely and said yes. Then she said something that changed everything inside my head. She said, "You are very lucky he built all this at such a young age." I asked slowly, "Built what?" She looked surprised and said, "You don't know? This whole company, the projects, the investments, it's all his." My heart started beating fast. I felt like I missed something very big. When Daniel came back, I pulled him aside and asked, "What is she talking about?" He looked at me quietly for a moment and then said, "Emma, I wanted to tell you slowly. I didn't want money to change anything between us." I said, "Tell me what?" He took a deep breath and said, "I am the owner, and most of my income comes from investments." I didn't say it because I wanted you to love me for me, not for money. I could not speak for a few seconds. My mind was trying to understand everything. All those small things, his calm behavior, his confidence, now everything made sense. He was not just a normal man. He was very rich, a millionaire. But the strange thing was, I did not feel excited about money. I felt shocked and also a little scared. Not of him, but of what this truth could bring into my life. Because I knew one thing very clearly. If my family ever finds out about this, everything will change. And I was right, because just 2 days later, something happened that I never expected. I was sitting in the living room, checking my phone, when suddenly I saw missed calls, many missed calls, all from one person, my mother. My hands became cold. My heart started beating fast again. She never calls me like this. Never. I waited for a moment, thinking maybe it is a mistake. But then my phone started ringing again. Same name on the screen. Mom. I stared at it for a few seconds. So many questions in my mind. Why now? Why after everything? Why after the wedding? Slowly, I picked up the call, and before I could say anything, I heard her voice. Soft, sweet, different. Emma, my dear, how are you? I closed my eyes, because I knew this was not going to be a normal conversation. And somewhere deep inside, I already understood the truth they finally found out about Daniel. I stayed silent for a moment after hearing my mother's voice because something felt very strange. Her tone was soft, sweet, almost loving. And that was not normal for me. Not after everything that happened. Not after she did not come to my wedding. Not after she ignored me for so many years. So I slowly said, I'm fine. And there was a small pause on the call. Then she said, we were worried about you. And I almost smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was a painful one because I knew this was not true. They were never worried about me before. So why now? I asked her, why are you calling? And she did not answer directly. Instead, she said, Emma, you didn't even invite us properly. Everything happened so fast. And I felt something break inside me because I did invite them. I told them everything. They just did not care. So I said in a calm voice, I invited you. You chose not to come. And again, there was silence. Then she quickly changed the topic and said, anyway, we want to meet you, all of us, your father, your sister. We miss you. That word miss felt so fake that it almost hurt more than anger. I did not know what to say. My mind was full of questions. But before I could answer, she added something that made everything clear. She said, we also want to meet Daniel. And in that moment, I understood everything. This was not about me. This was about him, about his money, about his status. I closed my eyes for a second and took a deep breath. Then I said, why? And she said quickly, because his family now. I almost laughed, but I controlled myself. Family, the same people who did not treat me like family now wanted to meet my husband because he was rich. I could feel anger slowly rising inside me, but I tried to stay calm. I said, I will think about it. And then I ended the call. My hands were shaking a little, not because I was scared, but because I was angry, very angry. Daniel came into the room and saw my face. He immediately understood something was wrong. He sat next to me and asked softly, what happened? And I told him everything, every word my mother said, every feeling inside me. He listened quietly like always. Then he said, you don't have to meet them if you don't want to. And that was the difference between him and my family. He never forced me. He gave me choice, respect, space, but still. Something inside me wanted to see them. Maybe not for love, maybe not for connection, but for truth, for closure, for answers. I wanted to look into their eyes and see what they really want. So after thinking for some time, I said, I will meet them. Daniel looked at me carefully and said, are you sure? And I nodded slowly, yes, but this time things will be different. 2 days later, we planned to meet at a restaurant, not our home. I did not want them to come into my space, not yet. When I reached the restaurant with Daniel, my heart was beating fast, but my face was calm. I walked inside and saw them sitting at a table, my mother, my father, and my sister Lily. All three were there. And the moment they saw me, something happened that I never expected. They all stood up quickly and smiled like they were waiting for someone very important. My mother came forward and hugged me, something she had not done in years. I stood still. I did not hug her back. It felt strange. Fake, she said. Emma, you look so beautiful. And I just said, thank you. My father shook my hand instead of hugging me, like I was a guest, not his daughter. And Lily, she looked at me from head to toe and said, "Wow, you changed a lot." But her smile felt different, not warm, not real. More like curious, like she was trying to understand something. Then their eyes moved to Daniel, and everything changed. Their expressions became even more soft, more polite, more careful. My mother said, "You must be Daniel. We heard so much about you." And I almost said, "No, you didn't," but I stayed quiet. Daniel shook hands with him calmly. He was polite, respectful, but I could feel he was also watching everything carefully. We all sat down and ordered food. But no one really cared about eating. The real purpose was clear. My family started asking questions, but not about me, about Daniel, what he does, where he works, what projects he handles, how big his company is, how many people work. Under him, their questions were not normal. They were sharp, focused, almost like an interview. I sat there quietly, watching everything, feeling invisible again, like always, like I was not even part of this table, like I did not exist, just like my wedding day. At one point, my mother said, "Emma is very lucky to have you." And that sentence hurt me more than anything because she never said I was strong, kind, or successful. Only lucky because of him. Daniel looked at me for a moment and then said something that changed the air around the table. He said, "I am the lucky one. Emma built her life on her own. She's stronger than anyone I know." For a second, no one spoke. My family looked surprised. Maybe they were not expecting this. Maybe they never saw me like that, but he did, and that meant everything to me. But the meeting did not end there, because soon my father leaned forward and said something that made my heart cold. He said, "We were thinking, now that you are married, maybe you can help the family a little." I looked at him slowly and asked, "Help how?" And he said, "Business, investments. We have some plans, and Daniel seems very capable." There it was, the truth, clear and direct. They did not come for me. They came for money, for benefit, for opportunity. And in that moment, I understood one thing very clearly. This was not just a meeting. This was the beginning of something bigger, something more complicated, something that could change everything again. And this time, I was not going to stay silent. I looked at my father after he said those words, and for a moment, I felt like I was back in my old life again. The same pressure, the same feeling of being used, the same silence inside me that I used to carry every day. But this time something was different. This time I was not weak. This time I was not alone. Daniel was sitting next to me, calm but aware, and I could feel his quiet support without him even saying anything. So I took a slow breath and asked, "What kind of help do you need?" My father leaned back in his chair like he was finally getting comfortable, like everything was going according to his plan. And he said, "We are thinking to expand our small business, but we need investment, guidance, and strong connections. Daniel can guide us, maybe even partner with us." My mother quickly added, "It will be good for everyone. We're a family after all." That word again, family. It felt so heavy and empty at the same time. I looked at my sister Lily, and she was quietly watching Daniel. Her eyes were full of curiosity, almost admiration, but not for the right reasons. It made me uncomfortable. I turned my face back to my father and said in a calm but firm voice, "You didn't come to my wedding." The table went silent immediately. My father looked slightly annoyed. My mother looked uncomfortable. And Lily just looked away. I continued, "You didn't call me. You didn't care. And now, suddenly you want help." My mother tried to smile and said, "Emma, don't think like that. We were just busy. Things happen." I shook my head slowly and said, "No. Things don't just happen, choices happen, and you chose not to be there." My voice was still soft, but now it had strength, something I never showed before. My father's expression changed. He was not used to this version of me. He said in a slightly cold tone, "We are trying to fix things now. Isn't that enough?" And that question made something inside me wake up completely. I looked directly into his eyes and said, "No, it's not. Enough." The air around us became heavy. Even the people sitting at other tables felt far away, like the world became quiet just for this moment. Daniel gently placed his hand on mine under the table, not to stop me, but to support me, to remind me that I am not alone. I continued, "You don't get to ignore me for years and then come back only when you see benefit. I am not an option. I am not a tool." My mother's eyes became slightly wet, but I could not tell if it was real emotion or just acting. She said, "We made mistakes, but we are still your parents." And that sentence hit deep because part of me always wanted to believe that, always wanted to feel loved by them, but reality was different. So I said quietly, Being parents is not just a title, it is actions, it is care, it is presence, and you were not there. There was a long silence after that, then suddenly Lily spoke, her voice soft but sharp. You changed a lot, Emma. I looked at her and said, No, I didn't change, I just stopped accepting things that hurt me. She did not reply. She just looked down, maybe thinking, maybe feeling something, I don't know. Then my father cleared his throat and said, So you are saying you won't help your own family? I looked at him carefully and said, I am saying I need time and I need honesty, not just when it is useful for you, but always. Daniel finally spoke at that moment, his voice calm but strong. I respect Emma's decision. Whatever she chooses, I will support her, but I also believe relationships should not be based on money. My family looked at him, and I could see a small shift in their expressions. Maybe they were not expecting him to speak like this. Maybe they thought he would agree. Quickly, but he didn't, and that made me respect him even more. The food arrived, but no one really ate. The conversation became slow, careful, like everyone was thinking what to say next. After some time, my mother said softly, Can we at least visit your home sometime? I paused for a second. Thinking deeply, my heart said no. My mind said be careful, so I answered, Maybe, but not now. She nodded like she understood, but I could feel she was disappointed, or maybe just planning her next step. After a while, we decided to leave. The meeting ended without any clear answer, but with many emotions in the air. As we stood up, my mother hugged me again, this time a little tighter, and whispered, We will make things right. I did not reply because I did not know. If that was true, or just another promise, my father shook Daniel's hand firmly and said, We will talk again soon. And Lily gave me a small smile, but her eyes were still full of something I could not understand. Maybe jealousy, maybe confusion, maybe something else. When we walked out of the restaurant, I felt a mix of emotions inside me. Anger, relief, sadness, and a strange kind of strength. I looked at Daniel and said, Did you see that? And he nodded and said, Yes, they didn't come for you. They came for what you have now. I sighed and said, I know. We sat in the car, and for a moment we were both quiet. Then he asked, Do you regret meeting them? I thought for a few seconds and said, No, because now I see everything clearly. He smiled slightly and started the car, but deep inside me, I knew this was not the end. This was just the beginning of something bigger, because people like my family don't give up easily, especially when money is involved. And I was right, because that same night, something unexpected happened again. Something that made the situation even more complicated. When I reached home and checked my phone, I saw a message, not from my parents, but from Lily. And what she wrote made my heart stop for a second, because it was not about family, not about apology, not about fixing things. It was something else, something that could break everything if I was not careful. And in that moment, I realized the real test was still coming. When I saw Lily's message on my phone, my hand stopped moving for a second, and my heart started beating faster again. I did not know why, but something inside me felt uneasy, like this message was not normal. Not simple, not innocent. So I slowly opened it and read her words. Hey, Emma. I need to talk to you alone. It's important. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, thinking, why alone? Why not in front of everyone? What is she hiding? What does she want? Daniel was sitting next to me, and he noticed my face change. He asked softly, What happened? And I showed him the message. He read it carefully and then looked at me. Do you trust her? That question was simple but heavy. I thought for a moment and said, I don't know. And that was the truth. I did not understand Lily anymore. I did not know if she was on my side or not, if she cared about me or just about what I have now. Daniel said calmly, If you meet her, be careful and don't go alone in a place you don't feel safe. I nodded because I knew he was right, but still something inside me wanted to know what she wanted to say. Maybe truth, maybe. Something hidden. Maybe something that could explain everything. So after thinking for some time, I replied to her, Okay, where? She answered very quickly like she was waiting. Tomorrow, small cafe near the old park. For PM, I looked at the message again and felt that strange feeling in my chest, but I still agreed, because sometimes you have to face things directly. The next day, I went to the cafe a little early. I chose a table near the window so I could see everything clearly. My mind was full of questions. My heart was not calm. After a few minutes, Lily arrived. She looked different, not like yesterday. Her face was serious. Her smile was gone. She sat down in front of me and said, Thank you for coming. I nodded and said, Tell me, what is so important? She looked around for a moment, like she was making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned a little closer and said in a low voice, You need to be careful with Mom and Dad. I felt confused and said, "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath and said, "They're not just trying to reconnect. They have plans, big plans." My heart dropped a little. I asked, "What kind of plans?" She hesitated for a second and then said, "They want Daniel's money, not just help. They want control. They are already talking to people, making ideas, using your name." My mind started racing. I felt a mix of shock and anger. I said, "How do you know this?" She looked down for a second and said, "Because I heard them last night. They think you are emotional, easy to convince, and Daniel is just a door for them." Those words hurt more than I expected, not because they were surprising, but because they were true. I stayed silent for a moment, trying to understand everything. Then I asked, "And you? Why are you telling me this?" She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something real in her eyes, something honest. She said, "Because I don't want this to go too far. I know we were never close, but you don't deserve this." I studied her face carefully, trying to see if she was lying, but she looked sincere. Maybe for the first time, I said slowly, "Why didn't you say anything before?" She sighed and said, "Because I was also part of it at first. I thought it was normal, that we should take the chance. But when I saw you yesterday, the way you spoke, the way Daniel respected you, I felt something was wrong, like we were the bad ones." Her voice became softer, almost guilty. I did not know what to feel. Part of me was still angry. Part of me was starting to understand her. But trust does not come back in one moment. It takes time. I said, "So what do they plan to do?" She looked around again and said, "They want to invite you home, make everything look normal, then slowly involve Daniel in their business. Documents, meetings, and later they will try to take control of his investments." I felt cold hearing that. My own family planning something like this. It did not feel real. But at the same time it felt exactly like them. I asked, "Do they think I will just agree?" She gave a small sad smile and said, "They think you still want their love and you'll do anything for it." That sentence hit me deeply because once that was true. Once I would have done anything just to feel accepted. But not anymore. I looked at Lily and said, "They are wrong." She nodded slowly and said, "I know, that's why I am telling you." There was a moment of silence between us, not uncomfortable, but heavy, full of thoughts, full of things unsaid. Then I asked her one more question. "And you, what do you want?" She looked at me for a long second and said, "I don't know, maybe I just want to fix at least one thing before it's too late." I could see that she was being honest, maybe not perfect, maybe not fully changed, but at least trying, and that was something. I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for telling me." She nodded and stood up slowly. "Just be careful, they won't stop easily." And then she left. I stayed there for a few minutes, thinking about everything. My mind was clearer now. But the situation was more serious than I thought. This was not just about emotions anymore. This was about decisions, about protection, about standing strong. When I went back home, Daniel was waiting for me. He immediately asked, "What happened?" And I told him. Everything, every detail, every word. He listened carefully, and when I finished, he said something very simple but very important. "Then we prepare." I looked at him and said, "Prepare for what?" And he said, "For whatever they try next." And in that moment, I understood this was not just my fight anymore. This was our fight, and we were ready, because this time we were not going to be used. We were not going to be silent, and whatever came next, we would face it together. After that day at the cafe, everything inside me became very clear, like a fog had finally lifted from my mind. I was no longer confused, no longer emotional in the same weak way as before. Now I understood my family's real intentions, and that truth gave me a strange kind of strength. But at the same time, it also made me more careful, because I knew they were not going to stop. People who think about money like that don't give up easily, especially when they believe they are close to getting what they want. When I reached home, Daniel and I sat together and talked for a long time. We did not rush, we did not panic, we planned calmly, step by step, like two people who trust each other completely. I told him, "They will try again, maybe very soon." And he nodded and said, "Then we let them try, but we stay one step ahead." I looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" And he explained, "We don't say no immediately. We don't show them we know everything. We watch them, we listen, and when the right moment comes, we stop them completely." His idea was simple but smart, and I agreed, because sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to understand the full truth before acting. The next 2 days were quiet, almost too quiet, and that silence itself felt like a sign, like something was building slowly behind the scenes. Then on the third day, just like we expected, my mother called again. Her voice was warm and sweet. Just like before, she said, "Emma, we were thinking, why don't you and Daniel come home for dinner this weekend? Just family time, no pressure." I closed my eyes for a second because I already knew this was part of their plan, but this time I was ready. I looked at Daniel and he gave me a small nod, so I replied, "Okay, we will come." My mother sounded happy, almost too happy, and she said, "That's wonderful, we will make it special." After the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions, not fear, not exactly anger, but something like alertness, like I was walking into a situation where I needed to be fully aware of everything. The day of the dinner arrived. I chose my clothes carefully, simple but confident. I did not want to look like I was trying too hard. I wanted to be myself, strong and calm. Daniel was also ready, relaxed as always, but I knew he was paying attention to everything. When we reached my parents' house, I noticed something immediately. The house looked different, cleaner, more organized, almost like they were trying to impress someone, and that someone was clearly Daniel. When we entered, my mother greeted us with a big smile. She hugged me again and then welcomed Daniel with extra warmth. My father was also acting very polite, more than usual. And Lily was there too, watching everything quietly. I looked at her for a second, and she gave me a small nod, like a silent message. "Be careful." We all sat down, and the dinner started. At first, everything seemed normal. They asked about our life, our plans, our future. But slowly, very slowly, the conversation started moving in a different direction. Just like Lily warned me, my father began talking about business, about growth, about opportunities, and then he said, "Daniel, you have a very strong position in the market. Your experience can really help us." Daniel smiled politely and said, "It depends on the situation," my mother quickly added. "We are not asking for anything big, just some guidance, maybe small support." I stayed quiet, listening carefully, watching their expressions, their body language, every small detail. Then my father stood up and brought a file from another room. He placed it on the table and said, "We prepared a small plan, just an idea. You can take a look." I felt my heart beat a little faster because this was exactly what Lily told me. They were already prepared, already planning ahead. Daniel opened the file calmly and started reading. His face did not change, but I knew he was understanding everything. After a few minutes, he closed the file and said, "This is a big project." My father smiled and said, "Yes, but with your support, it can become very successful." There was a pause, a very important pause, the kind of pause where decisions are made. I looked at Daniel, and he looked at me. For a second, just 1 second, but in that moment we understood each other completely. Then he said something that surprised everyone at the table. He said, "I will need time to think about this, and also, I prefer to keep business and family separate." The room became quiet. My mother's smile faded a little. My father's expression became serious. And Lily just watched, silent. My father said, "But we are family. Why separate?" And that was the moment I decided to speak. I said, "Because mixing them can destroy both." My voice was calm but firm, stronger than ever before. My mother tried to change the mood and said, "Let's not make this heavy. We are just talking." But it was already heavy. The truth was already in the room. After dinner, the conversation stayed polite, but I could feel the tension clearly. They were not happy, not satisfied. Their plan did not work the way they expected. When we finally stood up to leave, my father said, "Think about it again. Opportunities like this don't come often." I looked at him and said, "Respect also doesn't come often, but it matters more." He did not reply. My mother hugged me again, but this time her hug felt different, less warm, more forced, and Lily gave me a look that said, "You did the right thing." When we walked out of the house, I felt something lift from my chest, like a weight was slowly going away, but deep inside, I knew this was not the end. People like them don't stop after one failure. They try again in different ways, and I was ready for that, because now I was not the same person anymore. Now I could see clearly, think clearly, and stand for myself. And as Daniel started the car, he looked at me and said, "You handled that perfectly." I gave a small smile and said, "No, we handled it." And as we drove away, I realized something very important. This was no longer about proving anything to my family. This was about protecting my peace, my life, and the love I finally found. And no matter what happens next, I was not going to lose that again. After that dinner night, I felt like a quiet storm was building behind everything. Even though the house was calm, even though no one called the next day, I knew deep inside that my family was not done yet. People like them do not accept, no easily, especially when they believe they are so close to money and control. The next few days were strangely peaceful, but that peace felt temporary, like the silence before something big happens. Daniel continued his work as usual, calm and focused, and I tried to return to my normal routine too, but my mind stayed alert, always thinking, always ready. One evening, while I was organizing some things at home, I received a call from an unknown number. I looked at the screen for a moment, thinking if I should answer or not, but something told me to pick it up, so I did, and a man's voice came from the other side. "Hello, is this Emma?" I said yes, and then he said something that made my heart stop for a second. "I am calling from a legal office. I need to confirm some information regarding a business proposal connected to your name." My mind immediately became active. I asked, "What proposal?" And he replied, "A partnership request sent by your family. It includes your signature as a supporting member." For a moment, I could not speak. I felt cold, confused, and angry at the same time. I said clearly, "I did not sign anything." The man paused and then said, "That is why we are calling. The documents seem incomplete and we need direct confirmation." I closed my eyes for a second and took a deep breath. Then I said, "Please do not process anything under my name. I have not agreed to any proposal," he said. "Understood, we will pause the process," and the call ended. I stood there in complete silence, my hands slowly turning cold. My family had already started using my name without my permission, just like Lily Warrant. But hearing it in reality felt different, more serious, more dangerous. Daniel came into the room and saw my face. He immediately asked, "What happened?" And I told him everything, every word from the call. His expression became serious, not angry, but very focused, like he was connecting all the pieces together. He said, "This is not just emotional manipulation anymore. This is legal risk." I nodded slowly and said, "They are going too far." He looked at me and said, "Then we stop them now?" "Completely." That moment felt like a turning point. No more waiting, no more watching silently. Now it was time to act. But we still needed to be smart, not emotional. We decided to visit that legal office the next day and see the documents ourselves. When we reached there, the same man welcomed us and showed us the file. As I opened it, my heart started beating fast again, because everything inside was exactly what Lily described: a full business plan, investment details, partnership structure. And there on one page, my name, written clearly like I was part of it, like I agreed to everything, but there was no real signature, just a copied form, something incomplete but still dangerous. I looked at the man and said, "This is not mine. I did not approve this." He nodded and said, "We understand. That is why we stopped the process, but you should be careful, because if this continues, it can create serious problems." Daniel stepped forward and said calmly, "We will handle it." When we left the office, I felt a mix of emotions again: anger, disappointment, and something deeper, something like final realization. This was no longer about fixing a broken family. This was about protecting myself from them, because they were ready to cross any line, even legal ones, just to get what they wanted. That evening, I received another message from my mother. "Emma, we need to talk urgently." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, and then I replied, "Tomorrow, come to our place." This time, I was not going to go to them. They were going to come to me. The next day, they arrived together, my mother, my father, and Lily. When they entered, I could feel the tension immediately. My mother tried to smile, but it did not look real. My father looked serious, and Lily looked nervous, like she already knew what was coming. We all sat down in the living room, and without wasting any time, I placed the file from the legal office on the table, right in front of them. The room became completely silent. My father looked at the file and then at me. His expression changed. My mother's face lost its color, and Lily just looked down. I spoke calmly but clearly. "Do you want to explain this?" No one answered for a few seconds. Then my father said, "It's just a misunderstanding." I shook my head slowly and said, "No, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a plan." My voice was not loud, but it was strong, stronger than ever before. My mother tried to speak. "Emma, we were going to tell you." But I stopped her and said, "When?" "After everything was approved." She stayed quiet, because she had no answer. Daniel was sitting next to me, calm but firm. His presence alone was enough to show that things were different now. I continued, "You used my name without permission. You tried to involve us in something we did not agree to. This is not family. This is betrayal." My father's face became harder. He said, "We did this for all of us. You are overreacting." And that sentence made something inside me finally break completely, not in a weak way, but in a strong, final way. I looked directly into his eyes and said, "No, I am finally reacting the right way." The room felt heavy, like everything was reaching its peak. Lily slowly spoke, her voice shaking a little. I told her. My parents both looked at her in shock, and in that moment the truth was fully exposed. Everything was out in the open, no more hiding, no more pretending. And I realized this was the moment where everything would change forever, because after this, there would be no going back. The moment Lily said, "I told her," the whole room went silent like time had stopped. My parents looked at her with shock and anger, and for the first time, I saw fear on their faces. Real fear, not fake emotion, not acting, but fear of being exposed completely. My father stood up suddenly and said in a hard voice, "Lily, what are you doing?" But Lily did not look at him. She kept her eyes down and said, "I am telling the truth for once." My mother tried to control the situation. She stepped forward and said, "Emma, don't listen to this. It's all getting misunderstood." But I raised my hand slightly and said, "No, enough." My voice was calm but final, the kind of voice that does not ask, it decides. And in that moment, I felt something change inside me forever, like I was finally free from years of silence and pain. I looked at all of them and said, "I gave you many chances, more than you deserved. But you didn't come back for me. You came back for money." No one replied because deep down they knew it was true. Daniel was sitting beside me, quiet but strong. His presence was like a wall of support, and that gave me even more courage to continue. I said, "You didn't come to my wedding. You didn't stand with me in my hardest time, but now you want to stand next to my success. That is not love. That is selfishness." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time I did not feel soft. I did not feel weak, because I had learned that tears are not always truth. Sometimes they are just another way to control. My father tried again, his voice a little louder now. "We are your family. You cannot just cut us off like this." I looked at him calmly and said, "Family is not just blood. Family is respect, honesty, and support, and you gave me none of that." The words came out strong but simple, exactly how I felt them. There was a long silence after that, heavy and real. Then Lily finally looked up at me and said, "I am sorry for everything. I should have spoken earlier." I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw something different in her, something real, something human. Not perfect, not clean, but honest, and I nodded slowly. "At least you told the truth now." My parents looked at both of us like they were losing control of everything, because they were. My mother stepped closer to me and said softly, "Emma, please, we can fix this. We will do better." But I shook my head gently and said, "You had years to do better, not just now. When it benefits you." My voice was not angry anymore. It was peaceful. And that peace came from clarity, from finally understanding everything without confusion. Daniel then spoke for the first time in that moment, his voice calm but very clear. "We will not be part of any business with you, and we will not allow our names to be used again. If it happens again, we will take legal action." His words were direct, respectful, but strong, and they left no space for argument. My father's face became tight, but he did not reply because he knew this was serious now, not something he could control easily. The room felt like it was closing in, like everything had reached its end point. And in a way it had. I stood up slowly and said, "It's time for you to leave." My mother looked at me with tears. My father looked angry but quiet. And Lily stood there, unsure. I walked to the door and opened it, not in anger, not in hate, but in decision. A clear, final decision. My parents slowly walked out without saying much, because there was nothing left to say. Their plan had failed, their truth was exposed, and their control was gone. Lily stopped for a moment at the door, looked at me, and said softly, "Take care. I hope one day things can be better." I looked at her and said, "That depends on truth, not plans." She nodded and left, and just like that, the door closed. And with that sound, it felt like a chapter of my life finally ended. I stood there for a few seconds, just breathing, just feeling the silence, and then I turned around and saw Daniel. He walked towards me, and without saying anything, he hugged me, a real hug, warm and safe. And in that moment, all the tension inside me slowly disappeared. I was not sad, I was not angry, I was free, truly free for the first time in my life. Days passed after that, and my phone stayed quiet, no calls, no messages, no fake concern, and honestly, I liked that silence because it was honest, it was peaceful. I started focusing more on my life, on my work, on my relationship, on things that actually mattered. Daniel and I grew stronger together, not because of money, but because of trust, respect, and truth. And sometimes I would think about my family, not with pain anymore, but with understanding. Some people don't change until they lose everything, and maybe this was their lesson. And maybe one day, if they truly change, things can be different, but until then, I choose my peace, I choose my life, I choose the people who choose me. And as I stood by the window one evening watching the sunset, I realized something very important. Life is not about who leaves you, it's about who stays when everything is gone. And now I finally had that person, and I was never going to lose that again. In the end, I learned one very important thing. Not everyone who calls you family truly cares about you. Some people only come back when they see your success, not your struggle. My family left me when I needed them the most, but they returned when they saw money. This time, I did not beg for their love. I chose my self-respect. I chose peace. And I chose the people who truly stand with me, not the ones who only show up for benefit. Life became simple after that. Less noise, less pain, and more real happiness. So, if you are also going through something like this, remember, never lose yourself just to keep others in your life. The right people will never make you feel invisible. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this.